Success Grid Nation to this episode of the Success Grid podcast with your host Hussein Talib. In this episode, my guest, his name is Nick Gosling. We are going to be talking about retail renaissance, and how to thrive and in the age of customers centricity. And the customers is the talk about. We are going to talk about the importance of customers because everything is about the customer and the client, our consumers, in any business actually. So Nick is a fractional CEO and consultant who helps specialty merchant and consumer service providers take concrete actions to improve their operations and generate more profits without resorting to short-sighted, key knee-jerk reactions. He previously held leadership position in multiple specialties retail companies and has been quoted by leading business press. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome to have you here. So, first of all, uh, from the people who are watching on YouTube, if you are watching this episode on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. And yeah, we are going to go with this episode. So, as we know, Nick, retail is changing. It's very rapid. Like business in general, whether it's retail, online, whatever it is, it's changing rapidly and quickly these days with a lot of things going on, technologies, faster technologies, AIs, many things. And we are going to be talking about that. But first of all, because this is the Success Grid podcast, I want you to let me know or tell the Success Grid Nation what do you think to you success is, and what do you think it is other people saying about success that is not in line with what you think.
Yeah, there's a lot of conventional metrics that you can use to define success. To me, it's really just about having the freedom to do what you love, work on what you love, and help other people in that process. And I really think that, profits, cash flow comes from that. So as you're working on what you enjoy doing, what you're good at doing, and what's actually serving other people, like the customer, that naturally tends to lead towards financial success. I think if you invert that and you look at only chasing the money as the primary objective at the expense of serving other people or helping the customer, that is actually not the way to be most successful in the end, and ultimately even backfires on the financial side.
Mm,
The people who are most successful financially tend to be people who are, committed to helping others and serving the customer.
mm. Definitely, yes. That's very important as because actually we have a lot of like more than a competition now. It's like fierce competition, I guess. So yeah. So now, uh, in what you are doing and helping businesses in retail, so what are the things that you have seen in the past that or noticed that were actually completely wrong, or like you looked at it and said, this is something or a lesson that I should learn going forward?
Yeah, some common things that I've observed are, there's sort of a bias that many companies have, particularly older companies, that we've always done it this way. This has always worked for us. Therefore, this will continue to work for us in the future.
Mm,
And that's really where I think you've seen a lot of the changes in the past 15 or 20 years of very large legacy companies in retail and otherwise that have completely gone under or are at least a fraction of the size and market share that they used to be because of that thinking. And it's hard to overcome that bias from the inside. When you're actually a leader in a company like that, it's not as easy as just saying, "Oh yeah, well of course we should pay attention to innovation." It's just sort of strange how there's almost like a psychological institutional barrier to adapting with the times. But if you don't do that, if you aren't able to overcome that, ultimately, your business is probably not going to survive, or at least it's going to shrink pretty substantially or significantly from what it used to be. So that's very common.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, and that I think is really kind of the headline of this whole conversation about customer experience is, if you're not adapting to the changing expectations of the market and the customer, then eventually you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. So now in general, what do we want as as customers or consumers in general from retail stores? Do we want cheap prices first of all? What and from the things that we are aware of and things that we are not aware of, like prices and cheaper prices, something that we are aware of. But are there some other reasons that we don't know about and we actually go to a certain place for that?
Yeah, well, one of the big things that we've seen trend wise in retail is that kind of your undifferentiated retailers. You might think what you might see in mall department stores, where it's a very large retailer and they do a little bit of everything and nothing really stands out.
Mm,
That particular business model has been struggling a lot in the last 10 or 15 years and is continuing to struggle. And the reason for that is because of the customer experience is not particularly unique, and they're not really all that competitive on price anymore either. So, I mean, as a retailer, and really this applies to almost any business, you can position yourself on price. You can say, hey, we're going to give you the most affordable, economical, cheapest product. Or you can position yourself on being specialized and premium and saying, we're going to give you a very unique product or service or experience. And somehow, if you can do both, then you're really in a great position, but that's hard to do. The problem is when you don't do either one of those very well. You're kind of just in the middle. You're not very competitive on price, and your experience or your product or your service isn't particularly memorable. That's where you really run into trouble, and those are the businesses that I think are struggling the most.
Yeah, you brought a very interesting point. Like if they have some kind of a license and this license gives you, you can trade with everything, with every product you can put on your shelves. And these things that are existed in other places that are, for example, nearby. So there is no differentiation, even if you are a big store or a small store, whatever the size is, and the prices are not necessarily maybe lower, but people are not, for example, not necessarily sometimes drive that a certain kilos or miles away to get a cheaper product. It's the more they know that this place is having this type of product and it's better. And this is why I think we see in a lot of countries and places that there are certain specialties or stores that are opening. For example, if you're talking about uh, candies, candy shops and cakes, and they are specialized in certain things, right? Because this is what they want to get known for, and this is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that you can't have a um, a more what we call big box type retail experience. And so an example there would be like a Walmart.
Mm,
Walmart, um, Costco, companies like that are still doing extremely well in retail. They're some of the biggest and most successful retailers in the world. But where they're standing out is on the price and convenience side of things, not really the product specialization side of things. So really, it's just about kind of picking what kind of company do you want to be? Do you want to be competing on the price and convenience aspect? Which is hard to do for a smaller company because the bigger you are, the more purchasing power you have, the easier it is to compete on that side. Or do you want to compete on uh, really being specialized in a particular product or service and known for that thing, which tends to be easier if you're a smaller or mid-sized type business?
yeah. Now you mentioned there is when we talk about retail, there is a lot of talk about retail, which is we are talking here about, for example, brick and mortar businesses that have actual places on a location, and like for example, Amazon and a lot of these websites that actually sell the same things, like all of the things they sell. So So, do you think that there is a relation or some kind of competition between these two? Or do you think, for example, the brick and mortar business should actually have a presence online or not?
Yeah, so the term that gets used a lot is omni-channel. An older term is multi-channel, and a more recent term is integrated retail, but they all kind of mean the same
Mm,
thing. And the idea is that you want to have a presence where you are able to meet your customers wherever they happen to be. So for most of us, almost all of us these days, that is a combination of the physical and the digital. It's not like 20, 25 years ago where you would go online and that was like a thing you did separately during the day. Oh, I'm going online. We're now online all the time. We have smartphones, we're in front of like the internet is everywhere. We're online all day. And so our lives are a blend of the physical and the digital. And so as a retail business, you need to be blending the physical and the digital and really providing that type of experience that a customer can start on one channel and end on another. Maybe I want to start some research on your website, but I actually want to go into the store, look at it, feel it, test it before I make a purchase, and then I want to buy in store. Or maybe I want to comparison shop in store, but ultimately make my purchase online and just have it delivered at a time convenient for me. So it's a mix of those things, and retailers really need to focus on how they can balance um, between those two.
yeah. So having the physical location and the online presence, these two should have or relay the same message. Like we're talking about some kind of, for example, to have some kind of specialized product to be known for, right? So how the owner of that business can do the research in a way that they are choosing the right product for their business. Like if we are comparing small businesses to big businesses, like you mentioned at that point, these big guys have the power to buy in huge quantities and lower their prices. So you don't want to really compete. It's good if you have like low prices and you can make a profit, right? But how can we know that this product that we are specializing in is the thing that the community, let's say, wants, or the people who are coming to our website wants, and is making us profit, and it has a greater margin?
Yeah, so I think it's really more art than science. You need to just sort of test things and see what works. And there is a science element of it in that you want to look at your analytics, you want to look at, what is actually selling, but it's hard to know in advance unless you actually try some things out. And so, I mean, some easy things you can do are just talk to your customers, your existing customers, do some market research, ask them what do they like about your company, your products, your service, what don't they like, and maybe you offer an incentive for them to do a survey for you so you can collect some of that information. But it's a combination of talking to your customers, kind of doing general market research, what's happening in trends, what are your competitors and other businesses that are similar to yours doing, and then actually looking at your sales data and your analytics to see what's working. Uh, but yeah, my advice would be to you kind of just take a test and learn approach. Try a few different things, see what's working, what's not. And then once you kind of zero in on what is doing the best for you, where are you getting your most sales, your most margin dollars, because a lot that's the case in a lot of businesses is you'll go into some let's say restaurants just as an example, and they maybe have a huge menu, but if you dive into it, there's really only a handful of things that are constituting most of the sales, most of the revenue, the things they're best known for. And so when you zero in on those things, the things that you're doing the best, the things that are contributing the most to your financial performance, that's where you're going to have more success, and you're going to be able to specialize and niche down and hone in uh, on just a few things that you can do really, really well.
Yeah, and also the importance of, like you mentioning the example of having restaurants. So that's true. Like you see, like one or two items, three maybe max, are the most in demand. But how can the owner, for example, uh, have this way of, let's say, upsell people to other things that are related? Like, for example, in restaurants, if there is a certain dish, for example, that's a main course, right? Usually they're sold with wine, a discount for wine or whatever, a discount for an appetizer or whatever. So, how can, for example, also the other guys apply that to their place of business?
So I think in a physical setting, a brick and mortar setting, it's a little bit easier to do
Mm,
if you can train your personnel around that. It's really just a matter of training and then aligning incentives. So, like in the case of restaurants, for example, aligning incentives is easier because as a server, they already want to increase ticket price. And I guess this does depend on what country you're in and different cultures around tipping. But let's say you're in a tipping culture where it's based on percent of the bill. The higher the bill, the more money that server is going to make. So your incentives are already aligned. In other types of retail businesses, you may need to do some tweaking to your compensation model in order to make sure your sales personnel are actually incentivized, sales or support personnel, whatever they happen to be, are incentivized to upsell, cross sell, and then you train them how to do it. And I think the best way to do that is, again, you're looking at data. You're seeing, oh, customers who buy this product really enjoy this product with it. Would you like to try that? And sometimes it's as easy as just making a subtle suggestion to the customer at the point of sale. Just by asking, you will increase your revenue uh, in many, many cases. And it's not about forcing the customer to do something that they, don't want to do or don't need. It's about actually being helpful. So that would be my advice. You want to train your personnel to it, and you want to align their incentives so they actually see some upside, some financial benefit when they follow through on that.
yeah, and also I noticed or have noticed that generally the I think the big stores usually they take the phone numbers and the client's info, right? But the small guys they don't, right? So I think so. So this is an important thing because we talked about asking the client what they want or how they can do better than that or what kind of things that they would like to see and specialize in that if there is certain demand for certain product, right? So that's very important. So how would you integrate these technologies there? Because from what I am seeing now, because everything is online, people are like eventually will brick and mortar die? Like will everything be online, just sitting at home and ordering from home?
Yeah, I don't think so, at least not for a very, very long time. And a part of that is just because like I talked about earlier, we exist in both the physical and the digital. But very few people are only just sitting in front of a computer all day and they never leave their house and that's all they do. Some people are like that, but most people aren't. So it's going to be a very long time before we even, have the technology to make shopping a 100% online experience. There are things that need to happen in person. There are things that people want to see and feel in person. It's really just about providing that convenience that can take place on both channels. And one of the things that we've seen that's been really interesting is over the last 10 or 15 years, many of these pure play e-commerce companies like Amazon have been experimenting with brick and mortar. They've been launching physical stores because that's an important part, not only of customer experience, but it has benefits for your supply chain as well. And post-COVID, many companies that did really, really well for a couple of years or launched during that time that were pure e-commerce companies. All they did was direct to consumer e-commerce. Their sales were inflated at the time, but over the last 2 or 3 years since then, they've been struggling because it's very, very hard to succeed as just a purely e-commerce company unless you have just a really refined marketing engine, because otherwise your customer acquisition costs that you're spending on digital advertising can just get astronomical. And if you don't have outside funding from like venture investors and your sales aren't able to sustain that customer acquisition cost, eventually you're going to go underwater.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So we're talking now about any business in general to be constantly on the first foot to always improve their business on every side. But there is always some kind of a disruptions. Like people 3, 4 years ago did not know that COVID will hit the world and stop everything. So how can anyone, the regular Joe, I guess, like try to prepare for the worst and build from there to have this sustainable business?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of things you can do. None of them are guaranteed. So it's really just about kind of making sure you have your defenses in the best position possible and hoping that it works, because none of us know exactly what's going to happen, right? So it, taking some steps to prepare, like having some cash in your business for a rainy day. Many businesses, they get some money in and it's like, okay, well now we should spend it. We have some extra money, let's do more marketing, or let's buy new equipment. And maybe you need that, but it's important to make sure you have some contingency money, a rainy day fund in your business, the same way it's good advice just in your household as an individual to have that. A business needs it too. Another thing I would say is pretty common are companies that are over reliant on just a handful of key accounts or customers or suppliers. If one, and this is more in like a business to business setting than a business to consumer or retail setting, but if one customer is 20-30% of your sales, and then you lose that customer, well, that's a massive hit, right? But you can also think of it on the vendor side. If one particular supplier is providing 20 or 30% of your product, and then that supplier drops you, or they go out of business, or something happens in their own supply chain where they can't deliver product to you as quickly as you need it, well, then you're in trouble there as well. Because if your supplier can't get you product, you don't have any product to sell, and so you're going to take a big hit. Um, so it's really, I think, just about preparing the best you can, having some cash as a contingency in the business, diversifying where your money and your product is coming from, and you know just trying to survive when these things hit, because none of us know exactly how it's going to go. COVID, you know, certainly proved that. We were just trying to all figure it out from within our companies as we went.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Nobody knew that was coming. So it's very damn hard to do that. There is certain things that are in our control, like having to try to have some cash as a reserve, like you mentioned, to have to retain our customers that are especially the loyal ones, and also gain new ones, not just depend on these ones because you don't know what happens to them. Like life happens, I guess. And also, you mentioned the vendors, which is very important. Any business should have like at least two vendors in anything, because there, in general, I don't think there would be, unless in the contract or something that you cannot get this stuff from anywhere else. That's something different, I guess. This is the only reason that would be for it, right? So that's very important to keep in that in mind. So do you have any final words for that for people who are in retail or looking to open a retail?
Yeah, so I mean, most listening, if you're in that space or looking to enter that space, you're probably going to be, at least for a time, a smaller to mid-sized company. I would say, it's a lot easier if you're already in a physical location to go online than it is to go online into physical. There are a lot of tools available now in terms of web design, content management systems for e-commerce stores like Shopify, uh, and a multitude of others that make it much, much easier for a brick and mortar business to have an online presence. Like you can even, for pretty cheap, have a custom app built or build it yourself using just click tools. You don't have to be a programmer. As a smaller retailer, that's accessible now in a way that it wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. So
Mm.
I'm not saying it's easy, but it's much easier and realistic for a small business to do that. If you are a pure e-commerce business and you're looking to go into brick and mortar, that's a lot more challenging. I would say, you really want to work on looking at some partnership opportunities. Um, Look at companies that have existing brick and mortar physical presence that aren't directly competing with you, but are kind of adjacent. They serve a similar customer, and seeing how you can partner with them. That's actually one of the easier ways to enter brick and mortar from e-commerce.
Yeah, definitely. What you mentioned there, partnership is very important because the marketplace is getting competitive every day, more competitive every day. So having partnerships and looking ahead to the future is something that is can be very important for any business survival. So, Nick, thank you very much. Where can people get in touch with you, learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so everything you need is on my website, nickgosling.com. You can sign up for my free email newsletter there, as well as contact me for a complimentary consultation.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, Nick, very much for being with me on this episode of the podcast. Lovely to have you here. You provide us with insightful tips on how to deal with brick and mortar businesses and beyond a little bit than that. It's very important. At the end, any business in the world needs to look and adapt to changes and try to prepare for the worst in general and have partnerships because that is very important because it is getting more
Absolutely.
competitive every day.
Absolutely. Yes.